Yeah, to catch up and to tell you some tricks. I'm going to just expand a bit what I said last week, but I think it's going to be useful for you. So we're going to start with tricks for germinating seeds. I really recommend this technique on paper. I explained it in the last presentation. It can be very effective, especially for seeds that are more difficult to germinate because they are in contact with the water, and you can put them in a warm place. Sometimes you cannot put the whole plant or the whole post in the heat, but just a little bit of paper in plastic is useful. So I really recommend trying this technique for some plants. Now, when do you remove them from paper and when do you put them in the pot? Ideally, like when the seeds are like in this picture. When a seed germinates, normally the first thing that comes out is the root. So here you can see the root. Normally, you put the seed in water and with it, and maybe with some days, you can see just the tip of the root coming out. In those cases, me myself, I keep it on the paper because I want to wait until the root is like this. And then is when I move it to a pot, putting the root down, and then I cover it with ground. This is very delicate because what we want is the root to come out, but not the leaves, the cotyledons. Sorry, it's the cotyledon, not the leaf. If you can see here, this seed has been too long in the wet paper and heat, and the first cotyledons came out. The problem with this is if this happens and you are not attentive and you leave them in the paper, the stem is going to grow because of course the little plant is looking for the sun, and they are going to grow too leggy, and in many cases they die already. So when you put the seeds on paper, you really need to check every day. Me, I check in the morning and in the night sometimes to really catch the seed at the right moment. I know that it looks intensive, labor intensive and time consuming, but it is really effective technique. So I really recommend it. Now, if you are germinating the seed in the soil, how to prepare the soil for germinating? I would recommend you hydrating it. So before putting it in the pot or after you have put it in the soft, and that's it. You hydrate it before putting the seed, but you don't need to be adding water continuously unless you really see that the soil is very dry and you take it and it's very light, so it means that it has lost the moisture. And why is this? It's because if you keep seed too wet, especially in the soil, and you keep adding water and water, chances are that your seed will rot or it will develop a mold or something. So the best is just wetting them once until they germinate. If you want to keep the moisture, this is a very good idea. You keep it inside of some kind of pot. You can put or inside a Tupperware. I use the bags where the bread comes because my flight mates buy this kind of bread, so I just wrap the pot inside of that, so that as you can see, it makes like a chamber, and the soil is wet, so you don't need to be worried about having too much moisture or whatever. So this is a very useful trick. Now, when you are planting your seed in the ground, I recommend you not planting them in. They talk about different depths and all of this. I have to say that I'm quite general with depth at what I plant the seeds. In general, I only dust a bit of soil on top, and I press a bit, but don't overpress because think that the little plant needs to go through all the layers of the ground to come out. So if you press and you compact too much, it can be too extenuating and too difficult for the seed to come out, and maybe they die. So don't overdo it. You can always imagine that the seed germinate, and then you can still see the seed. You can always add a little bit more of soil on top to cover it. But if you cover it with too much initially, the seed won't be able to come out. So they are little tricks. All of this, maybe you know already, maybe you have germinated the seeds already and it's working. But in case it's not working, by listening these things, you can troubleshoot problems if they are not coming out. So this can be one of the reasons that you have planted them too deep or that you have overpressed. This is another problem that people have when the seedlings come out already, and it's adding too much moisture, so much that the soil is collapsed. If you see here in these pictures, do you see that it's shiny? This soil is oversaturated with water. If this happens, the seedlings normally die, and this is called damping off. When you put too much water in the soil and the roots rot, or they develop mold or some fungi inside of the soil and the seedlings die. So be careful with that. To avoid this, instead of putting water from above, the best is soaking the pots or the cells or wherever you have the seedlings inside of the water. This is for this you need to have holes on the pots that you have, of course. So this is one option. This is the safest. I have to say myself that I don't do this most of the times, because now I have the touch of how much water I need to put. So then you can be more risky and having them in Tupperwares and other things. But if you are not sure, or if you see that your seedlings are dying, this is something to try. This is something that can happen as well. These are aubergines, I think. Do you see that there is this is probably algae actually. There is green on top of the ground. This normally happens when there is not a good aeration. Goods, for instance, Mary that have shown us that she has the things against the wall. If there is not a good aeration in the room, this can happen. The way to solve this: putting the things close to a windowsill, opening the window now and then, so there is good aeration in the room and in the ground. Seedlings can die because of this, so it is something important. Other tips, especially when we start several plants in the same pot or in a tray. This can happen if you leave them for too long. As you can see here, all the roots are it's a mess of roots of one individual with another, and this is going to be very difficult to separate. You are going to break a lot of roots, and some individuals may not survive. So with this, either you can plant them with more space between them, or you don't leave them growing for so long in the same place together to avoid this. So watch out this. If this happens, there are several techniques that we can use if we have planted things too close together. One is thinning out, and this is very common with carrots, for instance. Some of you have got carrot seeds from me, so you might have seen that they are very, very, very small, and it can happen as well with rocket and other seeds that they are almost like dust. So when you spread them, chances are that you are going to put them too close together. So when they are a bit bigger, you can take some of them out. It is very sad. It is very painful, and I don't like it. Normally, what I do is I try to take them very carefully and I transplant them somewhere else. But many people just thin them out, especially if the seeds are cheap. They just don't care and they just thin them out. So this is what normally you take the ones that are the weakest, maybe, or the ones you leave the ones that have that are more developed, and you take the ones that are younger. So there are different ways of selecting them. And this is pricking out is the technique of picking one and transplanting to another pot, like in the picture. This needs to be done very, very, very carefully, as you can imagine, because they are very, very small and very delicate. Normally, you will do it when the plant has developed the first true leaves. Do you remember that in the last presentation we were talking that the first two leaves that come out, they are actually not leaves, they are called cotyledons. So you ignore this, you ignore them. And then when you have 2, 3, 4 true leaves, then is when you will try to attempt to move the seedling from a tray, for instance, to an individual pot. And the way of doing this is like sowing in the picture. Normally you has taken a plastic label, but you can take a pencil, a Chinese toothpick, I don't remember, Chinese stick, or something that you can put under the ground and very softly push up, because you need to put it at enough depth to try to save the root of the seedling, of course, and then very softly you will You will grab it or by the leaves if they are strong enough, or by the little stem, and then softly you will take both things together and then you will put it in the new pot, very, very carefully. And in this way, yeah, you're allowing all of them to survive instead of thinning out and just throwing away the one that you don't want. So normally this is what I do. This will save space as well. Imagine if you start the seedlings in a tray and then you move to individual pots. When you move them to individual pots, you are going to need a larger space, of course. So it's a very good idea starting all them together in a tray, and then as they grow, you split them. It's a good way of saving space. Yeah, so when we transplant, we have seen you take them from below, you try to save the root as much as possible, and then you just put them in individual pots. And in these individual pots, they will spend there the next stage of their life. They will have their own space for the roots, and they could develop. Normally, that's it. From this point, you will move them to the definitive place. You don't move them off pot every week. Let's say when the plant grows, you have them in a tray or in the paper or in the initial stage, whatever it is. Then you move them to their individual pot, and then that's it. So think that these individual pots, they cannot be super small. The compost needs to be nutritious because some plants maybe stay there 1 month until you plant them outside, or you plant them in a definitive pot outside or inside or whatever. So it needs to be good soil. Some plants you plant them directly in the individual pots, so you are not going to have any problem like cucumbers. Cucumbers very often they are planted directly in the pot where they are going to spend some time. So there are different ways of doing this. This is a tomato, I believe. Yeah, problems that we may have encountering now. That they are leggy, like in the picture below, is you see these stems have grown too much, or if they grow inclined. Normally these two things come together because the poor seedlings are looking for the light day after day, so they just overgrow. And normally they lay and they die. So it is very important, especially at the very beginning of their life, give them enough sun, and then every day turning them so they don't grow inclined only to one side. Or every day or every 2 days, so they grow in the same in all directions. I know I say this in the last presentation, but this is very, very important. It's very important because otherwise it's very difficult to handle a leggy with this stem. Normally when you move them to the second pot, you can just put them a bit deeper and put ground on the sides, but many times the stem ends up rotting because it's in contact with the ground. So it's very difficult to make a leggy plant to survive. So I would recommend trying to avoid this at all costs. That's why Susan was saying that she hasn't started, and sometimes it's not worth a start too early if you don't have enough light in your house, for instance. It is better waiting a little bit more, but avoiding this type of problems instead of losing a lot of seeds. So no worries, no stress. Every house is different, every plant is different, so hardening seedlings, we talked about this last presentation as well. It helps them to adapt. For the people who don't have a garden outside or nothing, one way of hardening seedlings is just opening the window in a window seed. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit more because the wind is also going to help our seedlings. Think that when they are inside of the house, there is no wind, there is nothing, there is no problem. So if you open the window and they receive a little bit of air and wind, apart from avoiding the problems that you have, if there is not enough aeration, the wind is going to shake the little plant from side to side a bit, and that is going to make the plant to have a stronger stem. So even if you don't have time to move them outside and inside in the garden, even if you don't have a garden to move them, open the windows now and then if there is good weather and all of this, so the little seedlings can move a bit. You're helping them. Yes, we talk about this as well. When you repot them, remember to put them a little bit deep, so the stem is not too much outside. This is a mistake that many people do. Remember to leave a bit of a space for water. You know what I mean? Like a little gap around the stem. So when you put the water stays and sinks under the seedling. Because when a seedling is very small, think that the roots are not, they haven't taken over the whole pot. Probably the roots are only down until it has enough time to develop a nice root system. So if you put the water very far from the seedling, chances are that the water is not going to arrive to that seedling. So try to put the water right where the seedling is. And this is the same in a pot or in the ground outside. When you repot, try to respect the roots as much as possible, and it's especially interesting if you try to respect the taproot. If it is in a small cell, probably the taproot is coiled on the bottom, so you really need to put the chopstick, that was the word that didn't come to me before, the chopstick or whatever, a little bit deeper and push. You try to save the root as much as possible. Remember that when we are doing direct sowing or planting them in the ground, that we can protect them, especially at the beginning. We have had a snow suddenly some days. I don't think that it's going to snow anymore, but maybe we have suddenly hail or rain, strong rain or whatever. So this is a good idea to protect them initially. And that's it. I say it was a very short presentation just to troubleshoot some problems. Now, some things that you can be doing apart from starting seeds is starting with your compost. Now that we are not too busy, you have time to study a little bit more about different composting techniques. You can get your composter and all of this. Also, I will say the spring and the summer months when it's hot, it is the best moment to start because all the composting, all the processes go much quicker. So now is a very good moment to decide what you want to do and to just give it a start. And then hopefully in autumn, for instance, if you have a lot of plants that you have chopped and you want to compost, you can add it to the compost and that compost has already started. So even better. So yeah, now is a very good moment to start, even if you live on site. Even if your garden is inside of your house, we have talked that you can start composting inside as well. So really give it a try. It is very, very nice. So inside, yeah, we can germinate the seeds, start to worry about the pots and all of this. If your garden is outside, then there are more things to do during the next weeks. You can keep preparing your soil. We have seen that you can, if you are doing the Nordic method, you have the cardboard, you have the compost on top or the manure. So it is very, very important that you if you haven't done that, you do it. Otherwise, in 2 months or something, when we start to put the plants outside, it's going to be too late. You can also start to take care of the weeds. For instance, if you have put fresh compost, now with the good weather, you will see that there are a lot of weeds coming up. To avoid having to deal with that, when we start to put the plants in the ground, it would be nice if now you don't let any weed to grow. So be on top of that now to save time in the future. And then you can also check if you have any type of pests and try to deal with it before you put your plants in the ground. And I wanted to put this picture for Martin, who was saying that has a problem of slugs. I have a problem of slugs as well. That's why I didn't keep any plant during winter, because I just didn't want to spend all the winter taking care of the slugs for a couple of plants. And this is what I'm doing. So I put different objects down in the ground. If you see, it's close to the path of the cement that we have. And then what I do is I go in the evening or first thing in the morning, and I put I put them upside down, and I take the slugs and I put them in this bottle of milk. And then when I'm going for a walk, at least 1 kilometer or two from my house, I put the bottle in a rubbish bin, or I take the bottle and I release the slugs far from my garden. In this way, you are not killing anything, but you are getting rid of them. And I'm picking maybe like 50 slugs every day. So I hope that doing this every day or every 2 days, in the end, I'm going to get rid of a lot of slugs. So I don't have to deal with them when I put the plants on the ground, because then it is more difficult. They start to eat your plants and it's a pain. So now is a very good moment to start to do this. More homework. And this is for people that has the plants in pots or outside or in the ground or whatever. You can start to think how you want to trail them. Some plants are going to need trailing. This one that you see in the left is tomatoes. So this can be very easy to trail in pots. As you can see, it's a bamboo stick, and you can get these bamboo sticks, I think even in Tesco probably, but in garden centers or whatever. In the center you can see other types of trailing. There are bamboo sticks that are with a curve on top, or that they are three together bound in the extreme. In the right up you can see cucumber. This is quite complicated, as you can see. It doesn't need to be that complicated, but what I mean is, even if you have plants in pots, you can and you should trail them. So they grow in vertical, they have more support, they have more aeration. This is another way of training. This is from a intensive farming, intensive crop. But this is for you to understand the idea. In this case, they are strings. The strings are attached to the ceiling and goes down. And what you do is you just twist the plant around the string. So it's not something hard as a stick. So you can just twist the plant around. The problem with this is that you need to be careful, because sometimes the stem grows and the string strangulates the plant. So you need to be losing the string sometimes. So when you attach it on top, it is better if it's not super fixed, but with a knot that you can untie easily and give more space to the plant if it needs. Hope you understand what I mean. Otherwise, we talk more after. And this is how it will look like if you have the strings. They are all growing upright. Picking the fruit is easier as well, of course, because they are hanging. And yeah, that's it. This is how it will look like. It's very clean, as you can see. Very, very clean. This is the way of doing this in our gardens. You can create a frame of wood and a string attached on top, and you just twist the tomatoes or the plant that is down around, as you can see. You can do with different plants. This is cucumbers. In this case, they have a stick, and the stem is just tied around the stick. You can do this in your garden as well, very easily, or in a pot. This is another one. I think it's some kind of pumpkin. As you can see here, there are two woods together, so you have two sides. If you do the one in the right, you can have just one line. In this way, you have two lines. And another advantage of this is that some people in the middle of the two woods, they can have some plants that they like to grow on shade as well, so you can use more the space. Yeah, and this was for talking about session 6, if you want. It can be the same, half class, half chat with questions if you want, and we can talk more about growth. Our plants will be probably a bit bigger, so we can talk about pruning maybe, some fertilizers, some troubles probably that we will encounter, and then maybe fruiting and harvesting of some plants, maybe peas. We can see. And that was my idea about the days. We can keep talking more. So today is 20th of February. I was thinking that maybe we can have the next one in 2 weeks, the 14th of March. And then in 2 weeks from that, I'm going to be busy because on Saturday 3rd, I will be giving a herbal balm and salve class for the London Wildlife Trust. Is it for free? So if you're interested, I can just send you a link. It will be very interesting. You can do so many things. It's like a DIY class of balms and salves. So I was thinking that we can have our class then the week after, the 10th of April. We can talk now to see what you think.